Why don't we take it away with the first question?
Hi. So first of all, I just want to say my name is Carolyn. Hello.
Hello.
I am a psychology undergrad student in my final semester, and hopefully will be attending a master's program next fall and be a therapist as well. And
Yeah.
I just want to thank you guys for doing this talk because it's really inspiring. I've never personally heard of anything quite like this before. I've heard of drama therapy and that kind of thing, but I think it's really great to sort of be able to make something new and incorporate this for kids. I want to work with children specifically who have suffered from sexual assault and sexual abuse, and they do typically, or not typically, but sometimes have really difficult emotional problems as they grow older, and so it's nice to see a different way to sort of approach that. So I guess my question would be to you, what has been sort of the most difficult part of getting this program off the ground and keeping it running?
The most difficult part has been getting this program off the ground. It's challenging. It's great to come to a place like PAX where we can talk about role-playing games and everybody nods their heads like, oh yes, of course, this is good for you. It's a different game trying to explain that to a counselor in their 60s who maybe had an experience in the 80s with mazes and monsters, and now, it's...
Poor Tom Hanks. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Also, running a business, to be honest, he's a teacher and I'm a therapist, and neither of us know how to run a business. So
We've learned a lot.
that's been kind of a challenge, kind of getting started. I will say there's some stuff that was surprisingly easy. These groups, we've been doing this 3 years. We keep clients very easily. Like, people come in and then they don't want to leave. I'm sure you guys know, once you start playing, you're going to keep coming back to the table. There's going to be that itch, that yearning to come back and play another RPG. And that definitely sticks up in our groups. The kids that come into our groups, they get social interaction out of it, and they get amazing experiences, and they have a fun time with it. I do want to kind of name drop for you, and maybe anybody else who's listening. There's a group in Pennsylvania called the Badana Group, and they have worked with sexually aggressive youth and people who've suffered through trauma using role-playing games, and they would totally be worthwhile to look up. And we went to a convention of theirs called Save Against Fear that was all about games in therapy, so I would definitely recommend it.
That is really awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, it was a great job pursuing a degree in psychology. I approve.
Thank you.
Hello. My question is, how young do you usually start having people come to your games? Do you have an age limit generally? And there's a part two, but what's that?
Oh no, you can.
Okay, well then, part two is that is and is it just generally, do you have kids with that are on, say, the spectrum, like people with autism, or how has that been for them?
So the first question, when we started off groups, we just saw teens. Our cutoff was basically 13 to 19. And then we started getting some people who are a little older. I think we have someone who's 23 or 24 in our group. And then we also have a full group of younger kids who are all 10 and 11. We don't mix the sort of a cutoff that happens developmentally around the teenage years. We don't want to mix the 11-year-olds necessarily with the 16-year-olds. And we tend to do kind of a mixed model with a lot of the groups. But I think you could take it as young as 7 and 8, depending on the role-playing system that you're using. There's a great system that's being developed by Monty Cook Games called No Thank You Evil, that's specifically being developed for younger kids, and it's awesome. I think it comes out next month. I'm very excited for it. The second, can I answer both questions?
Yeah, go for it.
The second question, yes, we see a wide spectrum of autism-adjacent disorders within our groups. So everything from ADHD and what would have been considered Asperger's before it was removed from the DSM to actual autism or even sometimes just lagging social skills, no real diagnosis. And it works great for them. In fact, that's maybe our target audience is within that area, because it's opportunity for them to have clear rules-based structures for how to do things.
And predictability.
It's an opportunity to be there and be social in an environment that they know that they have some control over, and an opportunity to step back when they get frustrated because it's their character that's in this situation and not themselves. It works perfect for that group.
Okay, like, thanks for that, because I have a friend who has actually got a 7-year-old son that is autistic, and sometimes she worries about like how he's going to be when he gets older, or certain other things, like how like certain like good ways to help him get adjusted or help him make friends. So, and you said the game that's coming out next month is called No Thank You Evil.
Yep, by
All right.
Cook Games.
All right,
Who's the woman who developed it?
Shanna Germain.
Shanna Germain did a lot of the development on it. She's spectacular. We've had some great chances to meet with her.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I have a bachelor's in psychology, and for my sociology project, I'm 29 now, so that was a long time ago. But this is how I got into D&D, because I decided that, oh, this is a strange group of people. I'm going to study them. So I started as an observer, and I ended up falling in love with it. And my paper was just going to be about D&D players, but it ended up being about the scapegoats in D&D groups, because I joined several different groups, and it seems like there always is a scapegoat, and people take things out on them in the game too, as well as in real life.
So interestingly, when you talk about like this as a group of people, the scapegoat idea falls in line really well, along with bullying. I had a kid in one of my groups who was clearly bullied at school, and I'm sure you guys can imagine the teenagers that are sitting down in our groups are often the teenagers that are bullied at school. But what was really interesting was that this particular kid was bullied in the group too. So all of these other kids who were bullied at school were showing up and then bullying this kid. And there's lots of theory of psychology for role and things like that. But what I realized was that that was the role that they were comfortable in. They were comfortable being bullied. That was how they saw themselves. And so even when they're put into a group where it's a bunch of kids who don't really want to bully people because they get bullied at schools and they don't want to translate that. But this one kid was so comfortable in that role that he would put himself constantly in that role by being extra annoying to other players, by doing things purposefully to their characters to mess things up in the game. And it wasn't until I gave him another option that he had another chance to take on like the hero role finally for his character, that he finally got a chance to like take on something else that was not being the bullied kid.
That's really awesome. And you wanted a story, this is short, but I was a wizard and I cast a stinky cloud in a dark small room with all my characters, all my friends. They all failed the dice save, so everyone hated me. Okay, thanks.
I just can imagine the name your wizard got after that.
Hi, so I've got sort of a two-part question. Has any research or studies been published on using role-playing games and kind of like, you know, in a therapy journal or something? And if so, which kind of you're shaking your head, do they use published games like D&D, or is that part of the research, or they kind of make a framework up?
There's a lot of research on play, and a lot of other. It's sort of like a lot of the research on video gaming. You can kind of make assumptions based on about motivation and things like that. So there's a lot of research you can claim as background information, but there's not been, to my knowledge, really anything saying that role-playing games cause X, Y, and Z. But there is research out there that says like narrative play makes you better at delay of gratification. And we're doing narrative play, so therefore people who play RPGs should be better at delay of gratification. So there's a lot of adjacent studies that we can use, but nothing that we know of yet. But once again, the Bodhana group that Adam mentioned earlier they're really doing some amazing work. They're writing a book and starting this work of creating the research that we can use to publish and then get some more credibility.
There's also a great website that does have, there've been occasional qualitative studies and things like that for RPG, usually like single individual, and look at how games have impacted them. But there's a great website called rpgresearch.com, run by a guy named Hawk Robinson, who's amazing, and he's been collecting and gathering research for everything related to RPGs and RPGs in therapy for 11 years.
Including LARPing.
Including LARPing, as it's incredible. Don't be too daunted by his website because it's a little difficult to navigate, but there's a lot of good information on there if you can kind of dig into it. The rpgresearch.com and Hawk Robinson.
Thank you.
Hi. My question was actually kind of related to that. I'm a music therapist, so I'm very, yeah, I think what you guys do is really awesome, and it seems like there's a lot of opportunities for stuff like that. Have you guys ever thought about like presenting with like creative arts therapies in general?
There's actually a drama therapy conference in Seattle in October, and we're submitting. They haven't gotten back to us yet, but there's a lot to be said for the creative arts therapies and this sort of movement because another one of our colleagues did a master's thesis about how applied role-playing gaming is essentially sit-down drama therapy. Mm-hmm. So there's movements in the creative arts fields to accept kind of the freaks that we are sometimes doing these alternative therapies.
Yeah, thanks.
I also just wanted to say, if you ever get the opportunity, I would love the image in my head of being able to like play music and D&D and have it be therapeutic all at the same time. That was like an incredible image in my head. I would love to hear that.
I did that once.
Take on the bard role and just run with it.
I did that.
Very awesome.
Did you do that?
I did that. We had to play instruments to go into a magic portal, and there was one person who played the drums on the table and one person who pretended to play the guitar. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'd never heard that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there a specific way that you deal with like uncooperative players who like to do what they want when they want and they don't like to just cooperate in general?
The short answer is it all depends on the player. There's almost always a reason why a player is choosing to be uncooperative. And we find that a lot of our players really want power. They want power and they want control. And so we try to find other ways to give them that power and control, either by collaborating on the narrative and they get to come up with some background information about something, or we use some information that they really want to include in the story. But we try to generally find other ways. It's not normally about the thing that it seems to be about.
The moniker.
Yeah, I think ultimately nobody necessarily wants to be uncooperative. They just want to take on that role of having more power within the group or having control over what other people do. There are certain things that we do in our groups really specifically to stop some of that behavior. Stuff like we don't allow them to attack each other. It's just not allowed. When they try to do it, we stop the game and we go, just so you know, we're not going to allow you to attack each other. It's not going to happen. It makes the game really boring. Eventually you guys will fight, and then one of you will die, and then that person will be really upset, and then everybody else just has to sit around and watch them. That's super boring too. So we sort of just stop doing that. But there's some stuff you can be uncooperative without just straight up attacking the other players. The other things are the tried and trues. Have them rally together over a common cause. You should tell the Seamus story.
Oh yeah. So whenever we start the games, because we don't always know what the players are coming to us as far as their background knowledge, and so some players will come to us with pre-made characters, and we have everybody start off in a soup kitchen, because we don't have taverns in our games, so everybody sits around and drinks a soup out of mugs. So they met up in this soup tavern, and just to like set up the MacGuffin to start off the plot, and they're all sitting around with Seamus, and we have lots of NPCs in our games. That's one of the ways we cultivate the enthusiasm and the cooperation is by having NPCs that everybody likes. And so there's always this soup maven named Seamus, and Seamus comes around and serves everybody soup, and he says, "What kind of soup do you like? And what kind of soup? I have that kind of soup." And he's just this like hilarious character that the kids all love. And then somebody, a general necromancer, bursts in the door and kills Seamus.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everybody's, "We gotta defend Seamus. We need to avenge him."
You
And
guys
they
knew
have
Seamus for like 10 seconds.
One time we had a necromancer player who wanted to revive Seamus and ended up
he was like level he was level 1 or level 3 or something. So he couldn't revive Seamus. So because he really wanted to. So what we did was we let him try to cast a higher level spell, but he failed at it. So instead, all he did was revive Seamus's head. But with the caveat that he couldn't separate himself from Seamus's head more than like 30 feet or something like that. Like it would just be tethered to him. So now he had to carry around Seamus's head everywhere with him.
In a bag.
In a bag. He would just put Seamus's head in the bag and occasionally open it, and Seamus would talk about his soup recipes or how sad he is that he can't make soup anymore.
All right, thank you.
But to get back to the point of why that's important, it was an opportunity from that point forward. They wanted to kill that general so hard. There was no disagreement in the group, because anytime there was disagreement, Seamus would speak up and be like, "Boy, I wish I had my body again." And they would just rally behind that. Common foe a common cause of why you're trying to do this mission, or a common enemy who you really, really hate, which takes some good role playing. I like role playing really annoying kids. Who then the party just absolutely hates. They're like, "Yay, let's do this! This will be spectacular!" And then they hate him, and then they all want to get him. He ends up being the bad guy usually.
I had a gnome bard named Mordnap Nimbletoes, and he had a Mickey Mouse voice, and would just think the players were awesome.
They killed him almost immediately.
They shot him in the back. And then he came back as a ghost. I was like, "I don't know what happened, guys. I was just dead all of a sudden.
And then,
But I'm back. We can keep hanging out."
anyway, I hope that helps.
Practice your voices. That's
yeah.
Hi, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was like 12, and for a while I had really, and I still kind of do, but really, really bad like social anxiety, and I've found that role playing has helped out a lot with that, and so this entire program sounds awesome because I can just, like, 10-year-old me probably would have this would have completely changed my life, but I want to say real quick, I have a friend who's also got pretty bad social anxiety, and he really wants to play like a James Bond like suave rogue character, and from a lot of the people that have asked advice on this, they say you can only be as charismatic in character as you are, and I was wondering what you guys' thoughts were on this and how I could possibly help my friend become more comfortable playing his character.
We have this theory that you play the character you need to play. That every time you make a character, there's some reason why you're making those choices to create your character, and also some reason why you're playing that character the way you're playing that character. When I was a kid, I was bullied a lot, and I was very overweight, and people would make Jurassic Park jokes, or they would do that and shake the water when I would walk by. So I always felt so bad about myself, and I felt like I was taking up too much space, that I wanted to hide. So whenever I played RPGs, and to this day when I play RPGs or I play video games, I always play characters who are sneaky and who could flit in and out of the shadows, or really dexterous, could jump kick off the wall and stuff like that. And that character history has been almost my entire life. So I firmly believe we play the characters we want to play and that we need to play. And that we can learn a lot by playing those characters. So if somebody's playing a suave James Bond character, let him be suave. Let him see himself as a suave, cool guy. Because that will help him take those things, that confidence, into the rest of his life.
There are some things that we do, something that actually was brought up in an earlier panel by Ashley Brandon. I don't know if you guys, that was a panel yesterday. She's right over here. Talking about scaffolding. And we scaffold in a lot of challenges. We want them to be social, and we want them to feel like they can be successful at that. And sometimes that takes the ability to step in and try out what being social will be like, wherever your challenge level is for that. And then to step back and then have been successful, build up some confidence in that. So as an example, if we have like a really shy kid who is having trouble even speaking up in the group, we might put his character where he has to give a rallying speech to an entire army. And so he stands up there and he, go get him, guys. And for him, since he's never said anything at all at the table, that's a huge success. So I would say, yes, you're successful. You can see the army behind you rallying together. They're cheering you on. They're chanting your name.
Notice what he just did, though. He instead of saying your character inspired all these people, he said you inspired all these people. They look at you and they see how confident you are, and they see these things, and it lets this player see himself as those things.
But if there was another player who was already kind of suave James Bond guy, I'm going to demand a lot more out of him in order to get that kind of reaction. I'd also say being able to rely on dice. This is a game where I can't cast spells, and I am not an intelligence 20 guy. And the dice help me live that out. If I'm not suave and can't roleplay all of that stuff, and I want to say, like, I want to convince him to do better, I would just, as a DM, I would say, cool, give me what kind of thing would you do to convince them? They would say, I convince them by being demanding. And I say, cool, roll me a die. Let's see how that works out for you. And then continually ask better challenges from there forward that help move that along in smaller ways.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey guys. So I recently played through Life is Strange, and it's an awesome game, and it's a game about friendship. And it got me thinking about a question, which would be, it might not be exactly what you guys do, but it's kind of in the same alley because you deal with kids and stuff. Friendship that kids have this day and age, in this era, where it's a lot of one-sided relationships, where it's a lot of watching Twitch streamers, and my boss's daughters love, PewDiePie videos and going on Twitch and watching Minecraft people and all that stuff. And I just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit. Do you think that's healthy, good, and if so, how and why? Or do you think it's bad, and if so, how and why? Or maybe somewhere in the middle, because those kids probably watch a lot of Twitch streamers and stuff that you deal with. So,
I don't necessarily think that developing a relationship with somebody who's out of touch in like a moderate way is a bad idea. We've been doing that for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who have like real deep relationships with the characters on their soap opera.
right.
But I do think that all of that, and maybe screen time in general, is within moderation.
Right.
If you're spending 12 hours a day watching Twitch streams, that might be a real
Which a
problem.
lot of Twitch streamers do stream that long, and people watch it all day long.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
Can be a little terrifying to think about.
I as a therapist, my perspective is always moderation for any of that stuff. And how much is this getting in the way of the other parts of your life? For children, it's especially important to have social interaction. Social skills are a skill. It's like learning to play piano or something. You can't sit down and then play in front of Carnegie Hall your first time playing piano. It just doesn't work that way. You got to practice a long time. And social skills are exactly the same way. You have to be practicing them. Yeah. When you're not getting a feedback on any of that, when you're not getting, when it's a one-sided relationship like that, no matter how much you're sitting at your computer being like, PewDiePie, you're totally right. That's a great idea. Haha, that was so funny. Like that's all one-sided, and you're not actually practicing any social skills there. So having stuff like these games, like tabletop games, where you have to interact socially, where you have to practice that and have that be like a part of your regular schedule, can be hugely important. Or board games even. Board games are spectacular for that.
Even video games, if you're in the same room, provide a lot of the similar sort of play-based neuroscience stuff that happens to your brain when you play together. Sorry, that's my research knowledge for you.
He's the teacher.
But Jane McGonigal wrote a book, Super Better, if anybody's heard of this book, talking about some of the benefits of video gaming. And a lot of the benefits of social video gaming, even if you're playing if you're playing online, you don't get the same benefits. So if you're playing in the same room together, even if you're both staring at a screen, you can still get some of those benefits of being together and socializing.
Yeah, I grew up, I played baseball and stuff, but I was homeschooled, and I played a lot of EverQuest growing up, where I was playing with a lot of adults and stuff. So I was I feel like I matured a lot faster than my friends and stuff, so Now it's different, though. It's not really necessarily that. It's a lot of just watching other people play games and not necessarily playing games with other people. But thanks for the answer. And I know you guys are therapists because you didn't say yes, it's good or no, it's bad. You gave an actual full answer. So thanks.
I can't say yes or no to anything. It's a curse that comes along with training.
Hello. Thank you guys for this panel. It's been fantastic. As a storyteller, I'm going to take some of your wonderful, wonderful things like pause the game and drag people kicking and screaming into world building. Fantastic. But my question is, when you find yourself with that moment where it's a life or death struggle, a situation that's very critical, and you know that you have players that deal poorly with failure, do you leave it to the dice, or do you push the issue with a narrative, or how do you handle that? Because if you're worried about the table flip, and from rolling a 1 or a 2 or whatever it is, because they've rolled 6 in a row so far, do you find that it's better to just put it in the hands of chance, or do you try to narrate your way out of it, or?
There have been so many times where I regrettably asked somebody to roll a die. Where somebody said, like, yeah, I want to deal the final epic blow to this guy. And I went, yeah, give me a roll. And what do I do when they, like, I got a 4. Okay, well, your turn's over, so let's go. My advice would be every time before I ask somebody to roll a die, and this has taken a long time to learn, and I still mess it up all the time. But as a DM, every time before I ask somebody to roll a die, I decide for myself, do I have an idea for what will happen if they don't succeed at this? Do I have a way to narrate out of that or make that continually interesting? And there's lots of tips and tricks that I do for helping to keep it interesting even when you miss, especially like mid-combat. I always make my players describe what happens for themselves. Like, I want to know how they stood and how they swung their sword or what their spell looked like or whatever the case may be. Realistically, we adjust a lot of rolls. There's a lot of times that somebody rolled an 8 and I was like, you know what? Yes, that hits. That's successful. Good job. Just because sometimes you just need to have those successes. The other piece of that is, yeah, I would narrate. If they're on the level of frustration, there's 2 tricks to that. I would let their character be frustrated and not them. This is a good technique for externalizing. It actually comes from narrative therapy, and it's a part of the idea of moving in and out of the aesthetic distance, which is the thing that we were working on with the shy character, where we said everything was him. We can do it the opposite way too, where we say, wow, your character's super frustrated right now. And it gives them opportunity to not be the one with the problem. It's not them who's frustrated, it's their character who's frustrated. Right. And when you highlight that, when you give that opportunity, players will jump on top of that most times. They'll go, yeah, he's so frustrated, he's missing every single attack. And you're like, man, that's gotta be incredibly frustrating, what does he do about it? And now he gets to put all of that on his character. And now he gets to have excitement about giving his character stuff to do. The other, I said 2 things and then I forgot my other thing. Do you have another piece of advice? Can you jump in and save me? Oops.
What Adam was just talking about is that distancing piece. I think that's been one of the most important ways that we do it. If somebody does get really upset at the table, and we constantly see them getting upset, we try to scaffold their frustration level by making them frustrated little by little and showing that they can succeed when they are frustrated. So it kind of builds. We do a lot of assessment where we kind of challenge them little by little to see what their frustration tolerance is. But then really we're helping them put it all in their character. There's the concept Adam used called aesthetic distance. It's a concept we use in drama therapy a lot, where it came from, I think, a Russian novelist was standing on the edge of a boat, and he looked at, in the distance, he saw some fog, and he thought the fog was aesthetically pleasing. But this was like the 1920s or 1910s, when fog was also a reason why your ship might sink. So he decided that if the fog was any closer, it might be dangerous and it would make him upset. And if it was any farther away, he wouldn't see it. So it was right there at that perfect spot where it was aesthetically pleasing. And we use that same concept with our players. If they are too connected to their character, if they roll the die that fails and they say, I can't do anything right, then they're too close. And it's our job to distance them a little bit. But also, if they're too far distanced, like the player earlier who said, yeah, my character is going to say something really brave, then we can just make them the brave character. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thanks, that's perfect.
So a lot of my questions have actually been answered as I've been waiting, so that's nice because it's hard to prioritize. I am a professional counselor here in San Antonio, and I have not used RPGs because that's such a complex idea. Like, I found Flux is perfect for kids with ADHD or trauma where they're externalizing, and that's like really great. But that's in the context of an established therapeutic relationship with assessment and all of that involved, and I'm wondering about the context of what you do in that sense. Is there a referral process, psychosocial assessment that goes into kind of as people join your group, the way that you build them in and the way that your groups are established and the storyline progresses, or is that all that more naturalistic in the moment assessment like what you were just talking about in the game as you scaffold and challenge them and do assessment that way? And are you doing psychoeducation as part of it? Are you doing any processing afterwards or during to kind of reinforce that skill recognition?
There are a lot of good questions inside that question.
Yeah, that's totally true.
I think we should definitely talk out there after this is over because there's a lot of good stuff we should talk about in there.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to throw anything
Yeah,
else
no,
out.
I'll answer a little bit of that. The first is currently we're not doing any clinical assessment stuff like scale assessments or anything for intake or outtake for our groups, although it's something that maybe in the near future so we can help support research for this
Yeah,
kind
it's
of thing
going to be
going
necessary
forward.
for efficacy.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, I missed that.
Oh, it's going to be necessary for efficacy studies
Yes,
to have
yes,
the
absolutely.
validated scales.
So in addition to that, the groups that we run are not, they are social skills groups, so they're intended to be groups that you come into and you practice your skills. We do some breakdown in the group at times, but the idea is that these kids are all seeing their own therapist. And that they're working on the actual conversation about those skills outside of the group and then getting a chance to practice them within kind of a safer setting.
Okay.
But there's definitely a lot of pieces to that kind of have to come together in order to make that work really well. Yeah, I would be happy to talk to you afterwards about
Okay,
about
excellent.
all
Thank
that.
you.
Hi. So far we've talked about all the amazing benefits of RPGs and therapy and things like that. But I'm sure you have at some point encountered like a parent, a counselor, as you mentioned, I think in the response to the very first question, or someone who is completely and totally unconvinced. And I'm just curious, like, what your responses would be to, that kind of negativity of, okay, there's no way, you're wasting everyone's time. Like, what's like, how do you respond to that in a way that someone from another generation that didn't explore this, like didn't have this at all, like what's your response to them, and just your general thoughts on how you see this taking off in the future in a wider scale? Because I mean, you guys are the first ones I've heard of who are doing things like this. Do you know of other people who are around the country kind of taking this on, or basically just a general idea of the difference between now and the thinking of people who have never been exposed to games like this?
So there's two big questions in there, which is what do you do when you encounter a parent or a counselor or someone who doesn't think this is such a great idea, and then also where is this going? When I encounter a parent, I actually love it. Because what I do is I get really excited about it. So as soon as I meet somebody and they go, "Oh, you mean that like unsocial game that people play in their basement?" and I go, "Yeah, that one. It's a great game." And then I explain with the understanding that if they had ever sat down, if they had ever been a fly on a wall watching one of these games, there's no way they would have that attitude. There's no way that they would come in with an understanding and being like, "Oh, that seems like a game that's not very social or that's not very helpful." The game is so inherently good for you in so many ways, and especially in an environment where, as the guy was saying before, where people are watching like Twitch videos 12 hours a day. like, this is so much more social than that, and this is so much more beneficial than that the contrast is undeniable. So I know that they haven't had a chance to see that, and if I can just explain it to them in an excited way and demonstrate, like, no, believe me, it's awesome, it works so well, here's what it actually looks like. It's like people sitting down and having great conversations and sharing stories, and there are no screens involved. It's all paper and pencil and imagination. And often when you explain those things, everybody changes their tone. Sometimes it takes a little time and a little.
Adam convinced my dad. My dad is from South Texas and had no idea what any of this stuff was. And Adam sat down. I tried several times to explain to him what this looked like. And Adam bought him over 100%. My dad is now an investor in Wheelhouse Workshop. Thank you, Adam. I couldn't do it.
Where do you see this in 5 years?
As we started doing this and talking about it, this is our 5th time to come speak at conventions about this. We find more and more people have been doing little things, like there are therapists who run a D&D group here and there. And we're really just starting, this is the very beginning of talking about it. And networking and talking about how we can talk about this more and getting out there. So like Adam mentioned earlier, Hawk Robinson is really starting some amazing stuff. The Save Against Fear conference is in Pennsylvania every year, and there's panels, people talking about how they're using games in therapy. And my hope is eventually that we can create a set of models, just like within drama therapy, there's different people using the same basic theories for psychological growth and change, and I think we can do the same thing. I think we can create a model of therapy that is about rolling dice and probability and creating stories together. I don't know how to get there, but.
We use this primarily for social skill building, but theoretically, this could be used for everything. You could use this for dealing with depression, for dealing with anxiety, for PTSD. This would be amazing for PTSD for anybody who's got the background and is willing to work with it, or even like being victims of trauma, all of those things. Plus, on top of that, it gives so many tools at your disposal to be able to work with it. I fundamentally believe that with the right push, with the people kind of supporting it, with the people who are interested in it, helping to spread the word on it, that it's all about just building that momentum, and I know it could carry a long way, which is actually one of the biggest reasons that Adam and I started Wheelhouse Workshop, with the knowledge that maybe we'll run these groups, maybe it'll be great, maybe we'll figure out how to do this more and more and get better and better at it, but fundamentally, we're in the opportunity to help push this field and to help make something way, way bigger than just the two of us. I was going to mention there are people around the U.S. That are doing a lot of this work. There's stuff in other countries. I want to say Norway.
Yeah, Norway has a lot of public funding to do research on stuff like this, which is super cool. They do mostly LARPing, and I heard a study where they like closed down part of Oslo to LARP what would happen after like an apocalypse.
It's cool stuff. There's also a researcher who I think lives in Austin, Sarah Lynn Bowman, who wrote a book. Oh, I'm going to forget the name.
The Functions of Role-Playing Games. Sarah Lynn Bowman.
And she does a lot of LARP work, but a lot of the principles are very similar to the stuff that we're working with. So it's happening. It's just sizzling under the surface right now.
Cool, thank you.
I was curious what system you use, like not system, but what restrictions you put on initial character building, like alignments, or do they have to be neutral or better, or do you allow evil characters in your games, and how that dynamic, or how do you steer people towards what they need to be?
I don't really like the alignment system anyway, so I don't really play with it, and even in my personal game, because we world build, we don't really use any of the set Pantheon and we use D&D 5th edition, as I said earlier, but we don't really use the Pantheon very clearly anyway, so there's not like punishments for changing alignment or anything like that anyway. I've had one evil player who declared that he wanted to be evil, and he was the necromancer I mentioned earlier, and I talked to them about it, and I was like, well, normally I don't let people be evil, so let's talk about this being a journey of redemption for your character. And it was the journey that he needed to go on. So it worked. Yeah, that was really nice. It worked really well because he was a necromancer, and necromancers tend to be loners, and he could create all the friends that he wanted. So that was his journey. His journey was realizing that he didn't need to create friends that he could control. He could actually reach out into the world and risk being friends with living people too.
We do have some rules that we kind of put down, but they're all pretty soft rules. They're kind of based on what are the players coming to the table with. So generally, we say like don't play evil characters. We say a lot of our players are brand new players who've never touched the game before, and so we start off games. We want them to play first day. We don't want them to sit around and make characters for forever. So we use pre-made characters for everybody's first character. So we can say, do you want to be a fighter or a wizard? Awesome. Here you go. Now you're playing. And that works amazingly well for getting people introduced into the game. So, and you'd be amazed how much people will like dig into their first little pre-made character, and they'll like really really love that character. It's their first character. But all of that is pretty flexible. I run a group. One of the groups that I run right now is a lot of very experienced players, and they're all. They will rules lawyer all over me, and they're also playing a little higher level than a lot of our other players are, and we're also playing a more serious campaign. They're all in their upper teens and kind of early 20s and stuff like that. So we deal with serious issues. They don't know it yet, and they won't know it before this video comes out. They will know it before this video comes out, but they are currently dealing with having to work through genocide. And make decisions that are going to either keep or wipe out all of the orcs in their world. That opportunity for them to deal with more serious issues and more serious things is a super important thing for teenagers to have to learn to deal with. And so we'll adjust that game where it needs to be given the group of individuals. If we got one player who needs to be evil and so long as he's going to be helpful in the game and he's going to work through it within the game, then we totally want to encourage him to do it.
Awesome, thank you.
In my table of 10-year-olds, we like meet lizard men named a bug who likes to eat bugs. Different context.
I would just love to hear each of your favorite success story or your favorite aha moment that you saw with one of your players at the table, or even hearing how something you did at the table worked into their life outside.
I'm going to do the runic tattoo story because I love that one. So we had this one student who we were playing around with a larger game. So we actually play two different tables because we get like 8 to 10 kids in our groups, and we have to split them up into two different tables. But then we set the two tables within the same world. So they're sometimes going after different goals for the same mission. When we first started off with that, we had a big group for a big check-in. So everybody was playing in one game for the first day, and we set them all in another soup tavern, and we had them. This particular soup tavern had a big magical chest, so you had to put your weapons into, and it would close, and then all your weapons were locked up. Again, kind of forcing players into frustration. So they kind of meandered about in the soup tavern, and then all of a sudden it was attacked by like a necromancer who teleported into the tavern, and skeletons that went around. This was, I think this was actually the Seamus story. Well, another player had designed his character he was a big fan of Warhammer, and he had designed his character with the idea that he had rune magic on the inside of his arms, and he could summon his weapons at any point in time. And there was this moment where we were sitting there for the game, and he said, "I summoned my weapons to me." And we said, "You can't. They're locked up in the chest. It's a magic-proof chest. Your weapons can't be summoned to you." And he turned, and he had this horrified face of, "What do you mean I can't summon I designed my entire character?" And you could see him like starting to get really worked up about it. He was so upset. He designed his entire character around this one concept that he summons his weapons to him. And we said, "Yeah, it doesn't work. What do you do?" And he turned around and he goes, "I rip the arms off the skeleton and start beating him with it." And we said, "That totally works. You start swinging skeleton arms around everywhere." And he thought it was the best thing ever. And that turning point, that was a huge success. That was a huge recognition of where this game could be like immensely successful.
I'm going to tell a story I haven't told in a long time, so I'm sorry if it gets rambly, but there was the same story would line with the necromancer that I was telling earlier. I had all the players give me on a piece of paper what their character's deepest fear was. And we'd have been playing with this group for over a year, so this was a group that was pretty tight. And this was, I think, the same bad guy we played the Mafia game at a different time. And I described the scene where there's darkness that swirls around and everything goes black. And then when you open your eyes, you're all looking out of the same pair of eyes. And what you see is, and then I would describe one thing from the list of deepest fears. And I had done this in the moment. I didn't plan for this. I didn't plan ahead for what I was going to say. So, there was one situation where the player said his character's deepest fear was being alone. And in this time, the rest of the players, it was like being John Malkovich, where everybody was inside the head of this character who was, and I described, like, you look down, you're wearing the clothes of an elf, and everybody knew that it was the elf ranger. And the other players, and these are all players who in real life struggle with social anxiety and social isolation, they voiced positive things into this other player's head, where they said, you're not alone. We're here. Your friends are always there for you.
Wow.
And it was a beautiful moment. And then the necromancer's biggest fear was hurting his friends. And so I described a situation where they were in a dungeon, and his friends, his party mates, were chained to the wall, and he was standing there with a whip. And he said, I forgot what he said, but the party members said, "This isn't you. This is not you. Put down the weapon. This isn't you." And he looked up at them and he said, "What if this is me?" And all these players with social anxiety and all these social challenges said, "It's not." And then he put down the weapon.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
The third player was afraid of a world of cheese.
Yeah, it was nice little social relief after those other two.